This mind map is about insight, a very important concept related to humanistic management, action research, and the critical realist philosophy of science. These are heavily inspired by the ideas of Bernard Lonergan, who in turn is a primary reference of David Coghlan in explaining how we can perform action research within our organizations. Some ideas here are also inspired by how insight is studied in the creativity and marketing spaces. To facilitate learning, a useful mnemonic is ExTrAQ, which stands for experience, triggers, authenticity and methods, and quality assessment. Let's start with the experience of insight, or, in other words, how we experience the insight phenomenon. Another useful mnemonic is Eureka Flow. Sounds like Eureka, which stands for the unexpectedness of insight, a release from the tension of inquiry, the importance of inside conditions, the experience of extrapolating understanding from concrete events to abstract thinking, familiarity as insight crosses the habitual texture of the mind, and the flow experience. Insights could feel unexpected or even elusive at times. Insights that feel like real, eureka moments cannot always be manufactured or forced. Insights can emerge during unexpected moments or even when doing mundane tasks. This means that it is important to design rest and slack in doing action research projects and change initiatives. For those of you who like listening to music, insights can feel like the drop after a build-up that leads to a song's chorus. Insights provide a release from the tension of inquiry, which can either resolve the inquiry or lead to more questions. Take note, though, that insights are not necessarily correct answers to our inquiry. It is possible to feel a sense of release, but upon further investigation and validation, we find out that our understanding is wrong. In our conceptualization, insight is not something that we get from external sources. Remember that we are using the terms insight and understanding interchangeably. Therefore, rote memorization or acquiring knowledge from others is not a full insight experience. The implication is that insight depends more about our inside conditions and less about external stimuli, though external stimuli could help. Think of your typical mystery or detective story. The clues are there, but we do not necessarily get the full picture right away. Getting the full picture is the full insight experience. Insight is that feeling of getting it. Once we feel that we got it, we are able to extrapolate our understanding from a concrete event or context, then apply it in a broader context, or even a different context. The simplest example of this is when we were learning how to count. A math teacher could make students look at their hands and identify which parts are the fingers. The students could then understand that they each typically have 10 fingers. The math teacher could then show other objects in groups of 10, which could allow the students to extrapolate that 10 is a number that can be used to count other objects too. Once we have acquired insight, it crosses the habitual texture of the mind. In other words, once we see it, we cannot unsee it. Look at the example of the FedEx logo. Once you see the right pointed arrow between the letter E and X, it is impossible to unsee it. It crossed the habitual texture of your mind. Finally, the insight experience is highly related to the experience of flow as conceptualized by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. The experience of flow is analogous to the sports term, being in the zone, and the music term, groove. It is immersive, with the thinker and the thought almost becoming one and integral. Let's go to another branch of the mind map, the triggers of insight. Parker et al., in their advertising study, also calls triggers as insight mechanisms. The most relevant triggers for our context are deep personal experiences, expert research, challenging the assumptions of a domain or a field, and borrowing what works from other domains. Deep personal experiences mean that insights can emerge by drawing from our specific life experiences. These experiences can result from experiences and observations we might associate with encountering life or chance encounters with new information. The key is to pay attention to the details of our life experiences. Research serves as a valuable trigger for insighting. Experts can find specific insights that may not be generally known or common. Drawing lessons from what experts have done before or written on allows us to have ideas about what can work in our specific context. An alternative route to identifying insight is challenging conventions that govern the way we manage ourselves, our team, and our organizations. Challenging conventions is naturally more disruptive in finding insight because it forces us to question the norms that place barriers on our ability to reach truly breakthrough thinking. For example, Spotify challenged the convention that music albums must be bought and owned. We can actually rent music. Insight can also materialize by searching for similarities to other problems at hand. What we can do is to look at the actions or programs of other organizations and infer the insight. This may inspire us that what worked for them might work in our particular context. For example, we can view the business model of Netflix as borrowing from the subscription business model of gyms and the popularity of video rentals. Let's take a look at the next branch of the mind map, which focuses on the importance of authenticity, methods of acquiring insight, and look at the first-person, second-person, and third-person perspectives. This section of the mind map frames insight both as an outcome and process of being authentic in our cognition or thought processes. Let's start with the process and methods of acquiring insights. Lassalleans are already familiar with the Lassallean reflection framework. See or sense experience, analyze, reflect, and commit act. This reflection framework is actually compatible with what Lonergan calls the general empirical method or GEM. Lonergan argues that the process of insighting can be generalized to an empirical method composed of experiencing, initial understanding or insighting, subsequent judging or validation of the insight, and deciding or acting. In the Lassallean reflection framework, sense experience is analogous to GEM's experience. Analyze reflect encompasses both initial understanding and subsequent validation or judgment of insight, and commit act is parallel to GEM's deciding and acting. There are many definitions of authenticity, but for our purpose, we characterize authenticity as a state of being born from embracing four transcendental precepts. These are attentiveness, intelligence, reasonableness, and responsibility. Paired with GEM, the complete insighting process is attentiveness to experiences, intelligence in understanding or initial insighting, reasonableness in judging or validating the insight, and responsibility in deciding or acting. The application of authenticity and GEM should be performed across first-person, second-person, and third-person perspectives. First-person practice means self-awareness, attentiveness to one's thoughts and emotions, demonstrating intellectual and emotional intelligence in sense-making and meaning-making, being reasonable in the way insights are validated, and being responsible when it comes to decisions and actions that are born from discernment. From a second-person perspective, this means being others-aware, paying attention to the experiences of others, avoiding snap judgment of others, and acting in a way that is collaborative with others. Third-person practice means extrapolating insights and sharing them with others so that others may learn and act appropriately. Let's now explore the importance of assessing the quality of insights. Recall that insights are not necessarily correct. They must be validated and tested. To assess the quality of our insights, we can explore four angles: originality, relevance, usability, and vision. The originality attribute means the insight uncovered is fresh and surprising relative to one's particular context. This may come about from distant domains of knowledge, may not be directly related to our particular context. Relevance, or relatability, means that the properties of the insight seem credible and motivating for the most relevant stakeholders. Credible insights mean that they are believable. Framing insights as metaphors and analogies can help the stakeholders feel that the insight is relatable and relevant. Usability means that the insight must be applicable and feasible for the particular context or issue. A quality insight is an insight that inspires action. A well-articulated insight is succinct yet compelling. A quality insight inspires a vision, influencing the stakeholders to believe that the desired outcome is achievable. A quality insight may concretize both the desired outcome and the actions needed to materialize such desired outcome. This has been a crash course on insight, using the mnemonic ExTrAQ to help us appreciate the experience of insight, the triggers of insight, the quest for authenticity and methods in pursuing insight, and assessing the quality of insights.